Well Rooted is brought to you by Gerard and Associates CPAs. With locations throughout Los Angeles, Gerard and Associates has been guiding entrepreneurs and creatives towards realizing their dreams for over 20 years. Discover how they can support your vision at gerardcpa.com. Hey, it's Haneen. Welcome to another episode of Well Rooted. Today I am joined by startup founder, entrepreneur, creator, Layla Shaikley. If you don't know who Layla Shaikley is, you need to know because she is probably one of the most valuable sources of entrepreneurial and educational information on social media. I'm so excited for you guys to hear this conversation. It's full of so much value, so much knowledge. So without further ado, please welcome Layla Shaikley onto Well Rooted. Thank you for being here today. This is a full circle moment for Well Rooted because I think you're one of the first people I even talked about starting a podcast with. And I think that conversation with you was really just the momentum, factor, the motivation I needed to really, really get going on the podcast. So I'm glad to have you here today.
It was so in you. It was so obvious. First of all, we met immediately, clicked,
Immediately.
and went deep into conversation about creation. It was so obvious that you were so passionate and so articulate. So I'm so glad that you did it. I take very little credit, but I'm glad I'm here now.
I'm so glad to have you. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I think you are one of the most valuable sources on social media. I think every woman for sure, but every entrepreneur, every creator should be following you. There's so much that we can get into and that we will get into on this episode. But again, we met because also you're a very outgoing person. You just are someone that you're very magnetic. And I think that has a lot to do with how you were brought up and with your background. So I want to start there. And I want to start with you and your roots and kind of what went into making the Layla Shaikley we have today.
Well, I'm super excited to actually talk about that because I give a lot of credit to who I am to my parents and my community and my identity. And I'm a proper millennial, I'm an elder millennial. All these Gen Z Muslims and Arabs have no idea what they have going for them. We were Muslim or Arab at a time when there was just no representation. Aladdin was as good as it got. What was that movie? That terrible Not Without My Daughter was as close to it came. Do you remember that?
Where the guy stole the daughter, took her overseas, and it's desert and gray and
literally that was the story, right? So my backstory is my parents came here in the 60s and the 70s. And got married here, actually, and had 6 of us. So I'm number 4 out of 6, which probably also explains a lot about my personality.
That does, actually.
It probably explains a lot about my personality. So my dad came here for medical training and went through his medical training. My mom was a dentist at the time and then got her dental degree qualified, and they just kept having children. And my mom's goal actually was to open an Islamic school. So it's funny, they actually built our house in a way, like our childhood home that they still live in, where there's doors on each of the bedrooms. So it could just be a school if she felt like one day she wanted to open a school in her home.
That's amazing.
It's actually incredible. And so my mom ended up doing her thing and she opened a school in 1994. She opened an Islamic school. It's pre-K through 12th in Pomona. It's my favorite place on earth, City of Knowledge. And I think something that happened, which I only realized when I was older, was it was very hard to be a Muslim in the 90s and the early 2000s. We were all 9/11 kids, right? And at that point, I was in such I don't love the word sheltered, but it was sheltered. I was in let's call it a controlled environment. We'll talk like scientists, right? So I was in a very controlled environment where identity was a non-conversation. The norms were so protected and kind of in a shell that it was clear who we were. And I think that ended up becoming crucial by the time that I went to college because I kind of was who I was. My identity had formed at that point, and I was very proud of who I was. But I also wasn't stupid, right? I knew that generally people become powerful. At that time, it was in one of 2 ways. Now it's in one of 3 ways, right? Back then, you became powerful because A, nepotism. You know somebody who's like, oh, that's Layla, and she looks like me, and she talks like me, and she acts like me, and went to the same school. I'm going to grow her, right? Or path 2 is, oh man, Layla just did this awesome article in The Cut, and she's so smart. She's the hype girl right now. Let's go emulate her. But something shifted in the last 15 years, and it's the third and the most attainable path, I would say, for many people who are minorities. And it's kind of building influence and building power yourself by building network, right? By saying you don't really have to think I'm an expert. You don't really have to think I'm good at something. But if I can convince enough people on the internet I'm good at something, people will start to believe it and bite. You could start to create opportunity. And so the reason I bring that up now this early in the journey is that what ended up happening while being very aware of power dynamics and privilege, I actually went to architecture school. Thought I wanted to be an architect. Went to architecture school twice.
No way.
I'm an architect by trade, actually. Non-licensed, because I can go to jail for saying I'm an architect and acting like I'm licensed when I'm not.
Unofficially an architect.
Yeah, I take a lot of pride in the career I will never, ever do.
Right.
But I'm very
But
well trained.
You have the skills. You have the training.
Very well. Actually, it's a phenomenal thing to train in if you're like creative but confused. Because you just learn a ton of skills. But, DM me on the internet if you want me to convince you to become an architect.
This is going to come in later in the conversation, but you are a builder.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, you're a builder.
100%. I think that like architecture school played a crucial role in that. And so I go to architecture school twice. Why? Because I wanted to rebuild Baghdad, right? I'm Iraqi American. We went to Iraq literally like every other summer as kids. And this is back when nobody used to go. Like my mom, super anti-smoking, would go to Costco and buy Marlboro cigarettes. And she would bribe her way through the border because they wanted to draw blood. Who's drawing blood in a country with sanctions? With what needles?
Yeah.
Where's this blood going? And like, how are you going to check for, it was for HIV. How are you going to check for HIV in like 20 minutes and like let all these people pass? My mom was like, there's no way you're going to pull blood from my kids. So she would just bribe these people at the border. This isn't like Saddam's Iraq. And she'd get us over there. And we'd go for 6 weeks every summer. There was definitely no TV. I think there was 2 channels run by his kids. There was no internet. There was nothing. Like we would just go and chill and it was honestly a phenomenal time, like the best days of my life. And so I wanted to rebuild the country after the wars. So I go to architecture school and my master's I got from MIT. And the MIT thing happened where I actually got my dream job stupidly early. And I worked for the UN. Which was like, that was my, big, hairy, audacious 10-year goal. So I worked for the UN as an architect and I was like, this is so dumb. Like, I don't belong here.
Not much has changed.
Like, truly, like, I know I feel like a local, but I'm not a local. And there are locals who are smarter and better and they don't need security details every time they leave. Like, this is actually not my dream. And at the same time, I was in a class where, smartphones had become popular and the professor had asked us to change 1 billion lives with technology. So I met my co-founders, my now co-founders at the time, and we said, okay, what if we use mobility data to figure out when car bombs are going off in Iraq? Like, that's actually a good way to help. This is like the height of the there was like the earliest 2010s, the height of the civil wars there. There were so many car bombs and we're like, and I was actually in Iraq at some point when I was crossing a bridge and another bridge was exploded. And so like I get to my aunt's house and the baker's like, Yami, like, just like avoid Mediterranean bridge, make sure you don't go there. And so that's how information would spread. So I was like, okay, what if we actually figure this out through mobility data? Because we know cars stop when there's car bombs and generally there's a second bomb. And through that path, actually ended up getting a big German car company to agree to give us their mobility data. And they were like, we'll give you this data if you build this logistics product. We're young and naive and stupid. We're like, sure. So we start building this product. You see where the story's going. ISIS gets very strong in Iraq. German car companies out. We're stuck with this product. We march over to a professor's office over at MIT. We're like, what do we do? And he's like, actually, I know this Fortune 100 company that needs this product. And we sold a product we didn't have to like a 6-figure deal, which now that I've run a company for over a decade is incredible. So we like sold a 3-year 6-figure deal and built the product in the garage, startup style, like, figuring out how to do this thing. When implemented it ourselves, I remember going overnight to implement work with trucks, implementing like these trucks and, texting. Back then, I don't even know if we had Slack, texting my co-founders like, this thing isn't working. Let's get this up and running. And have only actually built the company since then. It's called Wise Systems. We work in last mile distribution. So imagine you are a beverage company, a cable company. You have to make 1,000 stops in a city in a week. How many vehicles do you deploy? At what frequency? When did they get there? When do we leave? And how do you use artificial intelligence to ultimately predict things? So that's where we are now. Over a decade later, we've raised 72, 75, 70 something million bucks and are running this business, which I guess is, I don't know if I'd call it a startup anymore, but that is kind of my origin story. And throughout the actually latter half of that, started making content to go back to where we started with, how influence is formed and realizing nobody looks at me and says, oh, this is a successful founder. Oh, this is a credible voice in business. There are as many business bestsellers by men named John as all women combined in 2020. Forget woman named Layla, right? So that's kind of the origin story in a very large nutshell.
Wait, that's incredible. And I had no idea that your origin story was sort of rooted in your roots, like in rebuilding your homeland. I think that's so beautiful and such a testament to not only you and your ingenuity, but really to what it means, I think, to be, as you said, like this diaspora 9/11 millennial kid and to really grow up in the aftermath of 9/11 and then also the wars and everything that's followed in Iraq and what we've seen unravel since. And that's, I hope everyone listens to that again and again, just with, because that really, like, if who's going to rebuild, like, honestly, and I love that you shared
Mhm.
that story. So you're one of six kids, Iraqi immigrants. I mean, this says a lot about who you are today. And I guess let's get into kind of like what you're doing now. I mean, we know about the startup that's no longer a startup. It's a full-fledged business. You are a full-fledged boss. But a lot of people know you from your content creation. I mean, you're pretty huge on TikTok and on Instagram. You're very consistent. What I love about your social media is that it's again, very valuable information, a wealth of knowledge. You're straightforward, it's direct. You don't beat around the bush. You give us what we need to know within a couple of minutes and we're like that's it. Where did you develop that style and how have you sort of fine-tuned your content to get to where you are today?
Yeah. Um, so if you look at like identity, right? Everything really does come down to identity with me. It's something I'm very proud of, very aware of. If you think about identity, and we talked about how like in the 90s and the early 2000s, our identity was either Princess Jasmine or Not Without My Daughter, right?
Mm,
And then what happened was, I think when Barack Obama probably came into office, there became more of an awareness of like, no, Muslims are human too, right? The 2010s.
yeah.
Actually, this reminds me, we had a very viral music video in like 2011, 2012, 2013 called Mipsters, Muslim hipsters. If
Mm.
you'd watch it now, it's like cool, but it's like 100% not revolutionary. I was like skateboarding in hijab.
Wait, you
And
were in the music video?
yeah, it's like I like competed. I was like one of the producers and I was like in it.
Wait, I love this.
Yes, it was in a music video we made and it went like insanely viral at the time.
You're like the Iraqi female version of like Mamdani. Like you just had like a random music video.
Oh my, this is the best compliment I've gotten all day. Free childcare in Los Angeles
Free childcare.
starting tomorrow.
Please.
If you're listening. And so we did this music video, it goes crazy viral overnight, like 1 million views on YouTube, and started a big conversation. And the conversation was like, does this represent us? And like my response was, no, absolutely it does not represent us, right? It shouldn't represent all of us. There's a billion of us. It should represent me. It should represent the other girls in the video, but we have to evolve outside of this. Us is only valuable in some circumstances, but us can also be very harmful when we're seen as a monolithic mass and we're fighting for basic acceptance in society, right? And so I actually, at the time I was still at MIT and I walked into a professor's office, Ethan Zuckerman. I'm so grateful for this guy because I walk into his office and he's like, I saw your video. I was so embarrassed. Your first time going viral, it feels like you're going to die. Like it was just, I was like, what do you mean you saw my video? That's not why I'm here. He's like, you need to write about this. And I was like, I want to live under a rock. Like I 100% don't want to write about this. He's like, not only are you going to write about it he said his specific words were, you're going to write about it before some old white guy like me writes about it. And actually you're going to send me a first draft next Monday. Before that, you're going to write a pre-draft and you're going to throw it away because you're going to think it's garbage. But then that first draft, I'm going to edit it and then you're going to send it back to me. And then we're going to send it to the Atlantic and I'm going to get it published. And like, that's literally exactly what happened. And I was so clueless at the time. The Atlantic sent me an email about like $100 and I thought I had to pay them $100 to publish. They were like, no, that's what we're paying you to publish. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Like send me the check. So it was one of those moments that was quite definitive because I got to put pen to paper to my thoughts, which was, I mean, now it's just I'm so glad that it's such elementary thinking, but it's like, we truly do have our own identities. That was the fight at the time. We're not terrorists. It was just so basic and so limiting, right? Because when you're fighting for your identity, you're not fighting for other things. And then what happened after that? The rise of Instagram, the rise of YouTube. So I could speak to Muslim women specifically. What did we earn in society? The right to be beautiful. Markets and brands realized we're very, very powerful at consumer sales. So you saw the rise of the Muslim influencer. You saw brand deals on the consumer side. Suddenly there were all these, and of course, I think Donald Trump helped. Funny sentence to start with. Donald Trump helped with some of the identity fight because whenever he's in office, everybody else wants to revolt by saying, no, we are extremely accepting of Muslims and, people who are different, mostly to like stand against you, sir. And so the Muslims became really powerful in consumption. And that actually still stands today, right? You see the influencer space, and that's that third path to power where people, these girls wouldn't have been the first to be picked by lipstick brands or mascara brands or jeans brands.
Right.
The brands were like, oh, you have a really big following, and I need to capture that. So I'm going to go ahead and send you stuff or send you cash, and you're going to make ads for me. And the space that we're beginning to enter, back to Mamdani, back to, you see some of this Rami. I think Rami's work is brilliant, right?
Groundbreaking.
He's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
And it's this like thought leadership space. And I would argue Rami's a thought leader over an entertainer. It's this space of like the Mamdanis and the Ramis and the Hanins of no, we're going to shift the way that you think about things. We're not just going to influence the way you look, which has power in itself, right? Regardless of where you stand on capitalism or consumption, there's something to be said about the power of being able to mobilize consumers. And so now there's this like thought leadership space. Very new. And very far from where, we're not terrorists days. Like,
We've
LOL. Imagine me like
Yeah.
posting a TikTok being like, we're not terrorists, like 0 views. So thank God. And so
Even though white people are like, girl, we know.
they're like, okay.
We know.
Interesting. And so where we are now, and this is kind of, I guess, a piece of the pie that I've really dug I'm really bad at idioms. This is where my immigrant comes out, my heels, my teeth. I sunk something into is this like thought leadership space, right? So in 2020, around COVID, it's the classic story. I had a baby, the world shut down. I was on maternity leave. I had nowhere to go. I opened TikTok. You guys, please don't go back in my TikToks because the first ones I was like trying to figure out what to do. And I did like mom
Actually,
skits.
don't go back on anyone's
No, it's
TikTok. Don't go
terrible.
too far.
Oh my
Just stay in like the
gosh.
first 3 or 4 rows.
It's so embarrassing. Like I was really trying to do the mom talk thing. You remember when they'd be like, this. And
yeah.
there's enough videos of me like that for me to be embarrassed, but you'll find out soon that embarrassment is a crucial recipe, like ingredient in my recipe to success. We'll talk about that too. But on TikTok, I started just talking about how to interview, how to get a job, how to build a company, how to really choose yourself when you will not be chosen, right? I would not be chosen. You would not be chosen. I'm not talking like I have no privilege. I have a lot of privilege that I'm very aware of. But at the end of the day, 2%, 4%, some menial amount of money goes to non-male founders, forget female founders, right? And if you look at the numbers of just about anything, like the odds are always against us. But there's
Always,
this
yeah.
new, I refuse to be a victim because there's this new world where we can kind of build it ourselves if we feel audacious enough and willing enough to go and take the leap and put ourselves out there in ways that are extremely cringy and feel extremely embarrassing. You've built a
I'm embarrassed constantly. It's just
We're
a
all- we're
constant
just
stream
general
of
state.
embarrassment at this point.
always.
Yeah.
Always. And I think we actually talked about that in our first conversation.
Yeah.
It was like, it's the cost of cringe. The cost of success is cringe. Like you just have to feel cringy.
You do. And it's funny. I think I've gotten used to hearing my own voice by now, as I'm
Yeah.
sure you have. But I have guests all the time that once I've texted them, I'm like, hey, episode's out. Let me know what you think. Right away, they're like, loved it. I hate my voice. Everyone loved it. Hate my voice.
Yeah.
It's so hard to like watch or listen to yourself, I would say, perform.
Oh,
in
for
some way.
sure. For sure.
It's really hard.
For sure. Nobody wants to be seen, right? And then like we're seeing ourselves and it's embarrassing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's embarrassing. And honestly, it's even harder to see. Like I think sometimes we're maybe more impacted by media and beauty standards and everybody looking like Kardashian, right? And so we kind of have an even harder view of ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And everything's sort of judged on a different scale now, as it was prior to TikTok, to Instagram,
It's wild.
to social media. But there is a lot to unpack with what you said there. I want to go back a little bit. Whenever I would say just listening to everything that you've done in your past to get here, as well as what you're doing with your content and what you just said about like Rami and Mamdani's, it's about sort of creating the systems that were not there before. So you're kind of you've done that physically with technology and in your business. You've literally created something that didn't exist before. And that's sort of where you have longevity in your career and where you've acclaimed this power as an entrepreneur and as a female entrepreneur, especially. And when we translate that to our culture, as you said, we're not a monolith. We're not all the same. So we're moving past just representation. Representation is that first step, right? That's that first foot in the door. I'm not great with like the metaphors either, but it's like that first step forward. And then ownership and creating the systems that give us the longevity is what really gives us power, I would say.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. I think that's exactly right. And so let's think about tech, right? There's a concept called the super founder. The super founder is this not belief at this point, it's research backed. This thing, once you build a business, even if it's not extremely successful, but it's successful enough, and you build your second business, that is the most likely type of business in tech to be a unicorn. So if you look at any unicorns or any extremely successful businesses, the founders did something previous that was like, fine, it wasn't a unicorn, but they have enough of a chip on their shoulder, enough knowledge to be really valuable, right? And so what ends up happening, the impact of that is that if you've built a company, let's say you've exited a company, it's very easy to get funding. Getting funding now like is very hard to do. As a first-time founder, it's an extremely big challenge. The CEO has to be dedicated to it for a period of time. Like it's 100% a challenge. As soon as you sell a company, people write you checks left and right, right? So then let's talk about tech specifically. When you kind of enter through the backdoor way and do your thing and build a business and then ultimately sell it, now you're on the same playing field as people with other opportunities. And if anything, you're preferred over other people because you've been able to prove yourself in ways that doors were frankly closed for you previously, right? I think social media is quite similar. I love speaking on stages. In case it's not clear, I'm a huge yapper. And so would somebody look at me by saying, oh, even Layla, who cares if she's, founded some company and went to MIT and worked at NASA and did all these things? Nobody would say, oh yeah, that's the keynote we want, right? But once you kind of watch a few reels, listen to a few podcasts, you're like, okay, like if the goal is to engage people, she could probably engage a few people on my stage.
Absolutely.
Right? And so you start to create these proof points that don't otherwise exist and proof points that aren't inherently built into assumptions about you.
Okay.
If I looked a certain way, there would be inherent assumptions about my ability to deliver, to perform, to communicate, to charm. I actually love talking about this study because it's so painful about how stereotypes are made.
Oh,
It's painful.
like about charm. I mean, you're pretty charming.
It's painful. So the way that people, when somebody looks at you or me, the way they stereotype us is they say, okay, there's two axes, competence and warmth. And so if you think about competence and warmth on a grid, there's a portion of society we believe is low competence and low warmth. And people put them in a category and they stereotype them in certain ways. And so the researcher, I think her name is Fisk, Suzanne Fisk or something. The researcher says there are certain parts of society that are put in this quadrant, whether they like it or not. People on welfare are often put in this category. Immigrants. My mom, who's the smartest woman I know, literally will like walk into CVS with like a straight up abaya. Like my mom does not care, like Iraqi abaya. And they'll treat her just terribly. And I'm like, I promise you, this woman can run circles around you, right? She if she didn't want to build a school and be a dentist, do all the stuff she does, she could be a Fortune 500 CEO in like a heartbeat. But people treat her very poorly when she's dressed like that. The next quadrant is high warmth, low competence. Who's put in this quadrant? Housewives. People who are like nice, but like not very smart.
Yeah.
It's kind of the way they're treated. Is that true? No. But we're talking about how stereotypes are formed, remember. And then there's low warmth, high competence. So actually they put a bunch of immigrant communities in this, like, Indian or Asian communities that are like, oh yeah, they're super smart, but they're not friendly. Like terrible stereotypes emerge, right?
Wow.
And then there's high competence, high warmth, and that's the golden quadrant. So think about all these idolized I don't know about where tech CEOs stand right now. Think about idolized celebrities. And people are like, oh, when, for example, a celebrity that goes to college, people are like, oh, they're so cool, but also they went to school. Like they're just the golden person. Right. And so if you think about the lens that people put on you at jump before you have the chance to talk about who you are, many of us fall in a category that doesn't serve us, right? So we're in this position where we kind of just have to develop the narrative ourselves.
Okay. And how have you found your narrative like over the years? Like how is it through trial and error, like through like just the consistency of putting out content? Because like for me, like I remember like the first time I ever like, for example, tried to like talk to my phone to like put content. It's such an unnerving feeling. And I feel like I didn't really have a voice. Yeah. Like I didn't really know what I wanted my voice to be, what I wanted the narrative to be. And obviously that's always like ebbing and flowing anyways. But I'm just thinking like there's a lot of people that probably resonate with what you're speaking and are very intelligent, but they don't have this persona, right? Or the confidence to really say, like, figure out what they want to say and what the story is they want to tell.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who is kind of struggling with that?
So I have an answer, then I have a much deeper answer. The basic and tactical answer is it takes reps. Everything takes reps. And generally feedback helps with reps, right? So you're like, Layla, what's wrong with this video? And I'm like, well, you sound like this, or you do this, or you do that. People can put their reps into GPT. I know GPT is controversial. People love it or hate it, but you can even put a script or a video of yourself into GPT, talk to it and say, tell me how I could do better. The deeper answer is I really, truly, truly, truly believe that, and if you're a parent, please listen, the like most hidden source of generational wealth is emotional intelligence. I truly believe it. And I see it with founders all the time. I'm around a lot of founders, successful founders, failed founders, second time founders, lots of founders. A lot of the successful founders that I know were raised in extremely intellectually and emotionally safe environments. And I think what I mean by that, because I would consider myself one of them, I think that like the largest source of my wealth was just being treated very well. And like I was very smart as a child, even when I was like super annoying. We were just talking about how before the episode, I was a big punk in the 6th grade. But ultimately, like I was in an environment where it took a lot for my parents to yell at me. It took a lot for my parents to scold me. And remember, we started this conversation by saying I was like encapsulated, sheltered, I was given guardrails in ways that I maybe didn't know. But as long as I was within that world that was created, I could do what I wanted. And it was very rare that I got in trouble. And so what did young Layla learn? Like, you could fail. Like, it's not the end of the world. Nothing you say is that embarrassing. Your parents weren't your first bullies laughing at the way that you talked or telling you to, why the heck did you spill the milk? Why'd you do this? We were all so lazy. You're never ready on time. Why aren't you ever, like the little things that maybe many of us say as parents on a daily basis, right?
No, it's very common
Right.
language. Yeah.
Why is your homework not done? You've been here forever. Been working this for 3 hours. It's being a parent. Like, we're both parents. We both have 3 kids. Like, it's very hard. And sometimes you release your frustrations in ways that, feel harmless, but actually over time are quite harmful. And so I truly, truly, truly believe that, like, I would love to give credit to myself, but a lot of it has to do with being raised in an environment. Actually, the other day, this is like one of my favorite things ever. My mom was running a workshop at her school on emotional regulation and parenting. She's always been way ahead of her time. And so the workshop guy was like, okay, everybody, the assumption was everybody had trauma. That was the assumption. So he's like, hey, everybody pull out a piece of paper. And me and my mom and my sister are there. And he's like, fill this question out, fill that question out. And we had to fill out 5 questions. And at the end, he was like, okay, now ultimately the goal of the questioning was to say, like, how are you described as a child? Look at how that makes you perceive yourself. If you talk to your kids the same way, that's how they're going to perceive themselves. So I look at my paper and it was like literally the way I described myself as a kid was like cool, loved, smart,
Perfect.
yeah, great to be around. I looked at my sisters and she's like, study hard. Nothing's more important than education. Great, well behaved, good kid. And then we're like, Mama, can we read yours? And we read hers, and hers was amazing. It was like Hababa, sweet girl, sweet girl, like Shatra, right? Smart girl. And it was all so clear that the way that she treated us, and my father and her just are so lucky to kind of have the same ethos on this, was also probably a result of her parents just being really kind to her and giving her this space to really just be. And my mom's a big personality, space to really just be, right? And so like the biggest source of generational wealth you can give to your kids is a regulated nervous system, and let them screw up, let them be morons. Kids are stupid, kids are dumb, kids say dumb things, kids are annoying. Like, I was all those things. Just don't make them believe that about themselves. Like my mom says, when you tell a kid something, they believe it. You tell them they're smart, they'll believe it. You tell them they're dumb, they believe it. So I think that at the root of my personal story is failure is safe. Failure's always been safe, right? And let's put all like, physical stuff aside, because fortunately I was also in an environment where I didn't have physical risk, right? I had a roof over my head and there was no abuse or anything. But, once that basic need is met, you're kind of giving your kid a cheat code by making failure safe and by making them really think like, yeah, they're perfectly fine. They're great kids, ideally, but they're perfectly fine and not inherently dumb or stupid or this or that. I think if you were not raised in that environment, the brain is so plastic. It just means you have to put more time in and work against it, right? If you find that anger is your immediate reaction response to things, you're costing yourself a lot of potential, a lot of opportunity, because your anger is coming in the spot of creativity or, what would be kind of maybe a tolerance for failure. Yeah.
I really love what you just said. I think that's great advice for myself and all parents to hear. And that's really great because as you said, you did say like you grew up in a sheltered environment. There were like noticeable guardrails, but you still flourished under those circumstances. And I think for us, kids that have grown up in this country where we want to keep our cultural and religious like life as very strong, especially at home as we raise our own kids here in the West, but we still want them to have this sort of creative freedom and this like emotional competence to be able to make the right decisions and the ones that will serve them in the future. I think that's just really, really great advice because you clearly have like this really intense bond with your culture and your roots, but as you said, been allowed to fail. And I think that's really impressive on your parents' part. As immigrants, to like give
Yeah.
your children permission to fail is just
Mhm.
incredible work by your parents.
My mom actually like scheduled failure in many ways. I was just thinking about how when we were kids, she'd be like, your first test, you can screw up and that's it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. She's like, your first
That's
test.
actually really smart.
She's like, you have no clue who your teacher is. You don't know how they test. You'll figure it out after one test. And after that, it's on you. But first test, I'll give it to you. And so she kind of like taught us that failure is like pretty good in some
And that kind of
places.
coincides with the professor that got you into writing and sharing your
Yeah.
thoughts, right? Where he was like, you're going to throw the first draft away. I love
Yeah.
that advice.
Yeah. And I honestly, if it weren't for him, I would have never done it. I would have never written it. So sometimes, you know, there certainly are some moments of like luck
Hmm.
if you're open to it, people who really help you along your way. But and I think another thing too, I was just thinking the other day about, so I texted my mom like 2 days ago. My mom got her doctorate or PhD, I can never tell the difference, in organizational leadership. I can't remember which degree it is, but it's a big degree in organizational leadership at 50. I know,
Wow.
I just thought about this now because I'm like, you know, I'm not 50, but I'm not 18.
Right.
And so I was like, man, I was thinking about this. She had 6 kids. She had a school she was running. She had an active dental degree that she never used, quite like my architecture
Mhm.
knowledge. And she just like went to school and made no big deal of it and did it at night and, you know, wrote a whole dissertation and whatever. And so I was like, that's so dope. Like, who just goes to school at 50 for however many years
No,
and gets a
seriously.
whole degree? So I texted her, I'm like, Mama, you're such a baller. Like, you're so cool for just like getting a random degree. I wrote random degree at 50. And then she responds and she's like, it was not a random degree. It was fi sabilillah and an obligation for my community.
You're like, okay,
I know, I
sister.
was like, okay, mom, always
Wait, I love
ever
that.
so perfect. Yeah. And so I think it's this true, she has this like belief. My dad, too, retired recently. And I was like, what do you want to do? He's like, honestly, I kind of want to get an MBA. I was like, get an MBA. Like, why not? He's like
That's
in his 80s,
amazing.
but I'm like, if you want to get an MBA, get an MBA. Like, you want to learn more.
That's such a great example, like
Mm.
for us and for everyone else to hear.
It's just like, you know, this they're so driven by knowledge as
Hmm.
a belief that somebody who holds a lot of knowledge is a resource to society,
Yeah.
you know, in a way that honestly better than myself or better than most people that I know. They're not driven by money or status or anything. It's just like, I want to be a resource to society. I'd love to say I'm there. I'm not quite there, but you know,
But you
hopefully
are
the
in
apple doesn't
yourself a
fall far.
resource to so many, I would say. And kind of bouncing off of that also, my mom went back to school when she had two grandkids and became a nurse. Like, and that was something she
So
always wanted
cool.
to fulfill. And that example, as long with as well as your parents, are just, I think, a testament to how we should reshape our thinking as parents, as adults. I think that because I also grew up not seeing that. Like, I see that in my mom, but generally speaking, like in our communities of Arabs, of Middle Easterners, we don't typically, or we didn't grow up seeing that happen a lot. It was kind of like you got married, you had kids, and then, you're like, that's kind of your life. And I kind of had like an existential crisis in my early 30s, which is like super young still. And where I was just like, oh, is this like all I'm gonna do now? Like, I had my third, like, it's a weird feeling to sort of think like, oh, I still have a lot of time on my hands to pursue something totally new if I wanted to. But what will that look like for me now? And I'm sure you've interacted a lot with women and moms in this situation. What would you say to a mom who has had babies, taken some time off work, wants to re-enter the workforce, or maybe start a whole new career, or start a business, or start posting online and going the influencer route, whatever it is, but she doesn't know where to start. She doesn't even know what she should be focusing on because she's just sort of been out of practice for so long.
Yeah.
Where should someone start?
Yeah. You know, the best way to think about that is resources. Actually, my dad said something recently. I reference them a lot and I'm not mad about it. But like a lot of questions that I'm asked kind of remind me of something they said. I remember once I was studying and my dad walked up and he was like, oh, you're studying? I'm like, yeah, yeah. He's like, it's when I used to have to like figure out what a word meant, I'd like go to the library and like get a book and like define it. And you just have this thing in front of
Yeah.
you and you can literally look anything up on this thing. And this was even before, you know, GPT did most of the work for you when it came
Mhm.
to researching and stuff. So I think that at this point, really what we're fighting against most is societal expectations and feeling like we need to give everybody a live update of our ever so perfect lives. And this, again, this like fear of being seen. And it's kind of, it actually scares me. That's the part of raising a kid that I haven't quite cracked that my parents didn't have to deal with, was this fear of being seen. Hopefully my kids are just never on the internet until they're, professionals.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I think we have to be very conscious about not being afraid of being seen and using whatever resources at hand and not trying to hold ourselves up to standards that don't really exist. Because as women, whether it was like 1900 or today or whenever, there will always be these usually not made by women standards and expectations for us to live up to for how long we're good for, what we could do, when we could do it by. And this is like, there will always be systemic issues of why women are meant to feel like a certain way and kind of encouraged to preserve and uphold looks over other things or whatever it might be. And so I think that you just have to really take that. I think a lot of the theme of this conversation, Haneen, is like, whatever status quo is, like, it doesn't really work for us. It works for a very specific population of people, and it's not us. And so you have to kind of apply that lens and the creativity and the flexible thinking that comes with it.
That's really great to hear out loud, because you just said like the quiet part out loud. We don't really fit into anyone else's expectations
Yeah, absolutely. So we
on so
kind of
many
have to
levels.
expect from ourselves.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so you really like advocate for obviously taking advantage of the technology that we have and using that to sort of find what you can pursue going forward and kind of assimilating that to your lifestyle and your family life.
And I think we're moms. Like, you will never be better at time management than after you have kids.
Yeah, no, 100%.
It's amazing. Like, what I
Yeah.
can fit into an hour is just phenomenal and amazing. And so I think the resources are endless. There's so many like online jobs and programs that'll help you return to something or do this or do that. And there's podcasts and there's people who are doing it. And you're no exception to the rule, right? If somebody else could do it, you absolutely could do it as well.
And that brings me into another topic that you are really great on educating, especially on social media, and that is you're going to have to face embarrassment,
Yeah.
right? And you say a lot that the cost of success is embarrassment. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So it goes back to, it was very embarrassing for me growing up, looking different because there wasn't a lot of representation. Back to these like basic concepts that are not concepts anymore, right? Like we would, I remember actually playing soccer. I was like 10, 11, or 12, maybe 14. I remember I was playing soccer and I would wearing pants under my shorts before it was a thing. And this is so like 2000s coded. They'd make us lift our shirts to show our belly buttons to prove we didn't have belly button rings on. It's just like on so many different
Britney
levels.
Spears
It's so
era.
2000s coded. And so I remember the ref goes around and he's like, lift up your shirt. And I was like, I can't. And he's like, you have to lift up your shirt. I was like, I can't. And my coach comes and he's like, no, like, it's cool. She doesn't have a belly button ring on. The ref's like, she can't play. And my coach was like, there's no way. Like, she's going to play. We'll have a girl go and check her belly button. And that's what ended up happening. But it was really a time when like you were made to feel physically uncomfortable for making a choice that was different than what things look like today. And so that's shifted a lot. Now, what was the question? I think I fell into my childhood trauma.
Yeah, it's okay. You can keep unpacking
like,
if you
so
need
messed
to.
up. I got so mad.
But about failure being the cost of success.
Right. And so built into our personalities, I think is at a younger age was like, okay, we're different and we're going to do what it takes and find creative solutions to play the game, even if it means not showing our belly button rings, and fight with this grown man ref who like, I have no idea why he's picking on like a 14-year-old, right? And so there was an advantage to knowing at an early age that like I couldn't really do things the normal way to get what I wanted. And then remember we talked about the failure being okay and failure not being literally like a fight or flight response as a result of being in a chaotic environment or an environment where I was told I was less than something. And I was able to push limits as a result, right? And so like I talk about MIT. I'm not a genius. I literally talked my way into MIT. This is my favorite story and I'm so open about it. I don't even lie about it. I was in I was applying to this grad program. I applied to this program at MIT. I emailed the director of the program. I was like, I want to come to your office hours. He's like, sure. I was like, okay. See you tomorrow. I take the Chinatown bus from my sister's New York City place to Boston. emailed some girl I hope she's not listening, hadn't seen in ages, was like, can I sleep on your couch? She's like, sure. So I walk into this guy's office, take my portfolio, and I'm like, I really should be in your program. And he's like, no, you shouldn't. I was like, no. Like this is why reasons A, B, C, and D. I support your research interests in A, B, C, and D. He's looking through my portfolio. At the time I had an internship at NASA, which was something else I 100% asked for and was not given, but we could talk about that if we want. And he's like, you're working at NASA? I was like, yeah. He's like, you don't belong here. You're fine. And I like literally fought tooth and nail. I remember leaving his office and sitting on the stairs, his building 10 at MIT, and just like sobbing and being like, I can't believe I blew it. I'm an idiot. Anyways, a few months pass and I'm like walking again in New York City to Strand Books, I remember. And I like opened the email that says, you got in. And I was just in shock. I couldn't believe it, right? And that ended up being a really consequential moment of my life. And by the way, I learned about the program because a few years earlier, I was on MySpace and I opened up a girl's profile, Ala, shout out to Ala, that was like future student of this blank program at MIT. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And I like bookmarked it in my head.
Wait, and that's how you found out about the
I would
program?
have never even thought about it. Like California girl, what are we?
Yeah,
we don't really do Boston things. And so it was this moment where like, I think that belief that like failure is fine. What's the worst that can happen? He doesn't accept me. Like my chance is 1 in a million anyways. Who cares? Right. And this belief that really, if you want to do something, you'll probably get there faster if you're okay with being a little bit embarrassed. I could have not shown up and not been humiliated and not slept on that girl's couch and just applied 7 years in a row. And maybe it would have worked out and maybe it wouldn't have. But you realize that you have the most control when you can kind of just look something in the face and say, the worst that can happen is not that bad. So I'm willing to deal with it, right? Especially if you may already have some preconceived beliefs or society has beliefs that maybe you don't look the part or you didn't go to the right schools beforehand. So I truly believe that like anybody, and you know, you're here in front of me. We both started this podcast by saying like we spend a lot of time embarrassed. I'm like, that's fine. I really don't care.
Yeah.
Is it a little cringy? Sometimes I look at a video and I'm like,
oh,
post
100%.
anyway.
100%. You're like, just close your eyes and post it.
Yeah.
But it
Post
also
anyway.
builds confidence, right? And that's how you end up becoming more confident and can show up more confidently in everything else that you do. Because as you said, you've put in the reps, you've built that muscle.
Yeah, I'm proud of it. I mean, I'm not, you know, it's nothing that what I do, I'm proud of ultimately. And I stand behind what I do. Ultimately, things are driven by values. You and I talk about values a lot. So I stand behind what I do. So it's like, well, if I'm a little embarrassed, who cares if it'll get me there faster? Because I believe in what I'm saying, right? I believe that we have an access. We don't have a pipeline. We have a pipeline problem, not because talent is not evenly spread. Talent is evenly spread, but it's opportunity often that's not evenly spread, right?
Right. And then when we get to opportunity and you have opportunity, another topic that you are very knowledgeable on and you talk about quite a bit is distribution. Is that sort of the way that we make the most out of the opportunities that we do get?
Yeah. You and I went down this distribution rabbit hole because my company ultimately is all about distribution, right? So full circle moment, our company now operates in the Middle East. So
No way.
it actually ended up happening, yes.
Okay, that's incredible. Congrats.
Yes, we do some deliveries there. So if we think about my company, think about, you know, the carpet we're sitting on, the water we're drinking, distribution is the lifeblood of a city. Somebody sells a good or a package or a service and it has to get places. It has to get to a lot of places. And so that's physical distribution. And recently when I was talking to you, I put together physical distribution and digital distribution, realized it's kind of the same thing, right? If you can figure out how to get yourself in the places that you need to be recognized or seen or appreciated or valued, you can increase your odds of success really anywhere, right? And we talked about how like if I wanted to get speaking gigs now, it's a lot easier because I kind of have an online footprint. Of course, the inverse is also true, which is why like the inverse is true. I'm really glad I think I built my social media presence after I developed my frontal lobe. So it would have been a very like different story. But you can kind of build your own narrative in a way that wasn't an option before the internet for many of us. And we were relying on other people to just like us.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you can share more of really what you want the world to know about you, and leave out what you don't and just let that be the focus.
Yeah.
So what are some of your favorite forms of distribution that entrepreneurs and creatives really should be taking advantage of?
So something that's counterintuitive is like the more likable you are, the more likely you are to get whatever you want in life. And this, you know, you get these, you hear about these jerks who are in these positions of power, and people think that they're very valuable team members, and that's really never truly the story, right? If you find somebody who is good enough at their job but very likable, people are more willing to coach them up than
Mm-hmm.
somebody who's like just as good and not likable, or a little bit better and not likable. And this goes back to why the stereotype thing is very important, because if people don't project likability on you, it becomes hard for them to want to like elevate you and really help you in certain ways. So I think that just being like a good person at the end of the day is pretty important, and being
Mm-hmm.
likable and being somebody. I also like, I like to believe I give a lot and I expect little, but I find that the universe gives back a lot. Like truly, alhamdulillah, it's like, you know, la shakartum la azidannakum. Sorry if I said that wrong, Mom.
Mm-hmm.
But it truly is, the more thankful you are, the more you get. And I really, really do believe that. So I think that I give a lot of stuff, information on the internet away for free. That's generally my ethos. Um, so people can ultimately have access and pay it forward in some way, and then the world will pay it back to me in some other way.
You are really a master of social media because you have a great TikTok presence. You really take advantage of those short form, immediate videos where you're able to just give that burst of knowledge. And then you have a great setup on Instagram. I follow you on everything. And I also follow your Substack, or I've subscribed to your Substack, and I get those emails as well. How do you, maybe I'm asking more for my own
Yeah.
personal reasons. How do you, because you really, you're a mom too, and you're a boss, and you have so much going on. How do you balance all of that in a way that makes sense for your life, where it's also very consistent?
Yeah. So my Substack is interesting. I'll give you another backstory, because I actually decided to build an email list because I heard a podcast. So I hope somebody decides to build an email list because they hear this. Um, I was listening to a podcast once, and this lady was like, "Oh, there's nothing more valuable than an email list." And I had a social media following at the point. I'm like, this feels weird. Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, but you know, who's reading email? Shortly after, I met with a book agent because I want to write books fairly soon. And I was like, you know, if I were to come back to you in 2 to 5 years and I were a killer candidate and no publishing house would say no, no agent would say no, why would that be? And she said, it's because you'd have emails, and you'd have 25,000 emails minimum, 50,000 to 100,000, and nobody's going to fight back with you, but 25,000 you have
Wow.
pull. And I was like, 25,000 emails? That's like wild. I never thought about that. At the time, I just learned about Substack. And Substack is, I think, the only social media platform that gives you people's emails. So when somebody subscribes to you, have their email, and you're building an email list. And the first year or two, I'd get like 4 likes, and I was like fine with it. I was just very consistent. My writing was also very bad, in all fairness. I think I was a good writer when I was a kid. Then I dropped it, and I kind of had to build that muscle again. And I kept at it very consistently, again, for the goal of influence, right? Because who's going to pick me to write a business bestseller? I need to be
Mm.
able to pick myself. I need to be able to sell it myself. I'm hoping I work with a big publishing house that'll help me, but like I expect in advance that, you know, matches my experience and the audience that I can reach,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that was the impetus behind it. And what I found in Substack was clarity in my ideas, and realizing that all my ideas revolved around the same theme and core and concepts. And this, it's like generally around growth and this ability to be very highly productive by absorbing cringe and having a lot of control over your emotional regulation and your nervous system, and
Mm-hmm.
ultimately tips to like grow, right? And so I find that like around that time I also dropped, I used to do random like vlogs and stuff. Now it's pretty rare I do that stuff, because I was like, I don't care. Like, I like what I wear, but I don't really care about what I wear enough
Yeah,
to sell to
yeah,
somebody else. I
yeah.
don't care about my day enough to tell other people what my day's about, even though that was a bit more of that still is a bit. And by the way, those videos still do a lot better. That's generally what people want to see more.
People want to see that.
People
Yeah.
want to see more, right? And so, like, I think that clarity's actually come by writing things out of what I really want to hone in on, regardless of what people want to see. And so now, like, maybe I'll do a vlog every now and then, but it's pretty rare.
Yeah, no, you have a really great cadence, and I get your Substacks every week. I read all of them because they're very rich in information while also being something you enjoy reading. And you kind of, you will sort of spin in. I remember reading a piece that started off with your mom in Iraq, right? You guys have to subscribe to your Substack to read this, but it's a really interesting read. And there's always so much knowledge that comes out of it too. So I love getting those those weekly Substacks. And you are really great. Again, at the cadence, like I love the consistency of your social media. It never feels like too much. It's very like to the point. Um, would you say like a majority of your followers happen to be women?
Oh, always, yeah.
And then
Like, without question.
what is like one of the top two or three questions that you get asked the most from women?
A lot of it often comes down to the ability to like believe in yourself,
Really?
right? How do
Yeah.
you do? Well, it's either time related or like, qualifications related.
Mm,
How do you manage this and that? How do you deal with this and that? So I think a lot of it comes down to perception and feeling like you maybe should be seen a different way. Um, and even when it comes down to consistency and back to like not really following status quo, like you and I were just talking about today, we were laughing. I was telling you how it's the first time I don't look a mess in a long time. It's just been a really chaotic last quarter. I don't really care, right? Like I don't do the typical influencer thing where I always have to look face perfect, clothes good. Like if I pull up on a hoodie and I'm looking a little bit scruffy, like I'm okay with that. It's kind of my
yeah.
brand. As long as the information goes out there, I'm okay with it. Now, would that align if I was a consumer or lifestyle influencer? Like absolutely not, right?
Hmm.
And so knowing that goes back to why the clarity of what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to communicate or educate about is really important. And also knowing my metrics are different too. I don't really care about likes. I will always get less likes, but I'll have equal likes and like saves.
Hmm.
And you could see, okay, the content is being distributed. There are people who are able to like learn something new. So I think that everything comes down to realizing like the system is not built for us. We have to build our own.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so interesting that you said women, like a lot of the questions they have for you have to do with that perception. And I think it's like public perception, but also within our community, because there isn't really like an example of this, like that and even especially as a hijabi, right? Like, I think like there should be more hijabi founders out in the world that are speaking publicly, but we just don't have that. And I don't know if it has to do with the perception of that public image or if it's like the fear of the perception in our own communities or what we've been told is the norm or okay. And it has to do with like sort of reconfiguring that stuff within our own communities as well.
Yeah, I think women are doing poorly across the board.
Just all around.
As a gender, we tend
Yeah.
to be believed in less. I think it's probably both. Like, representation helps. The guidebook of how to do something helps. Hearing
Hmm.
somebody, seeing somebody do it helps,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
And we will never be the first to be picked. People will never look at a lineup and say, yeah, that's the one. That's the one I need running my 100 million, 200 million, $50 million startup, whatever it is, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So a lot of it has to be us just really putting the pieces together ourselves and proving ourselves out first. But that's not what women as a whole are taught to do. We're taught to be sought after,
Hmm.
right? We're taught to be um, just generally presentable, and presentable has very specific standards,
Mm.
right? And so there's something to be said about just throwing it all away and like doing your own thing. Truly the theme of this whole conversation.
No, 100%. And it really piggybacks on what you said previously about which kind of piggybacks about like the email list, right? And like how you built that email list or you're building an email list. And I think also, and I think this is what I meant to go with earlier also, is that I feel like you have a strong ownership over everything that you do and say. And that if TikTok shut down tomorrow, Layla's still going to be doing Layla, and we're still going to be able to be in touch with you. We're still going to be able to follow you somehow because you've been able to sort of distribute your brand across these different platforms. And I don't think enough people understand how important that is.
Oh, for sure. Also, like TikTok, look at any of your favorite educational creators on TikTok. I promise you they're getting 1/19th of their views right now. And so
Mm,
TikTok has gotten really, and TikTok will shift. If you're listening to this in a year from January 2026, it might be something totally different. But as of today, what I've observed is it's kind of the brainless skits, lots of vlogs, a lot of lifestyle that's really hot. 3,
mhm,
4 years ago, education was super hot on TikTok. And so, like, I can post something on TikTok, it does way worse than a reel on Instagram, right? Reel and Instagram will have much more consistency, but like my Substack still feels like king in a way that YouTube is king, but I've never had the discipline for YouTube. And so, Substack feels like another way to reach that same level of ownership, really owning your audience, owning the emails without having to talk to a camera for 40 minutes.
Yeah, and ownership is, I think, more important now than ever before for us in our community because you you are, as we said before, you are reshaping what an female entrepreneur looks like. So you're rebuilding that system from the ground up. And when you have that email list, when you have, this image, like this platform and this platform, I'm like totally going blank now. But when you have those different forms of distribution, you are kind of making sure that you are going to be successful in any
Totally.
way. And as you mentioned, sorry, also as you mentioned earlier about like the book, that's, we're now looking forward to a book from Layla Shaikley. But now you have the means to do that as well.
Totally. Listen, like I will make myself a New York Times bestseller. Mark
Oh,
my
I
words
believe
now.
it. I believe
Mark
it.
my words now. I'm not gonna. I hope and expect that whoever I work with will mark it for me. But like, if it takes 5,000 sales, I will make the 5,000 sales happen. And I think that's the mentality I feel I need to have. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. But for me, it's worked out.
Hmm.
Is I can't really depend on society's understanding of what good business leadership looks like to do it for me. Like I kind of just have to do it myself. And I think another advantage is like, for anybody listening who's maybe feeling a little bit inspired, think far out. I started thinking about my book. If you have that type of planning personality years and years and years ago, before I even knew what it was going to be about, I still only mildly know what it's going to be about, to be honest. But like I'm setting the infrastructure up for success where I don't have to be on my knees begging anybody because like I just need to do it myself.
Yeah, and that's actually a theme that we even talked about when Alana Hadid was here, where, like we're doing so much work, in terms of, our community is in
Yeah.
terms of activism,
Yeah.
education on what's going on in the world, but we also need to be creating those spaces for us here also simultaneously where we will be set up for success because we have to sort of re-envision what that success is going to look like and create those spaces for ourselves. So I think you're a really great testament to that, and what that can look like. I want to again, like I hope, I wish we had like all day to talk because I feel like there's so much that we didn't even get to. But I want to wrap up with, in terms of everything you do. And by the way, like you are so much more than just a founder and an entrepreneur. You are an athlete. I mean, mashallah, I don't want you to get evil eye now because we are still recovering from ACL, but you are an athlete. You're a skateboarder. You're a mom. You're like a fashionista. I love your style. You have a really great sense of personal style. Like you're a great follow. So everyone needs to be following Layla Shaikley on Instagram and on TikTok and subscribe to her Substack. But with all of that being said and done and all the different roles that you play, what keeps you grounded and what does being well rooted really mean to you?
It's such a good question. Access beyond me, like community access, ensuring that when it comes to influence and power, this generation, generations to come, always have it easier than the last so that we can accomplish the work, whether the work is in activism, to your earlier point, whether the work is in influence in business, whether the work is political, right? Look at Mamdani, whether you're Rami and the work is in entertainment, but being able to really look past your identity being a limitation for whatever it is you want to accomplish and being able to focus on your brain is really the means to get you there. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Great advice. And where can everyone find you?
Oh man. I'm all over the internet as Leylul, which is like a nickname nobody's ever called me. But back when I had AOL, my brother made it up as my screen name and it just stuck with me.
And it just stuck.
Literally nobody's ever called me that in my life, but now I have it across the internet. So it's here to stay. So Leylul, I'm on Substack, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok. And feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to help whenever I can. And Haneen, thank you so much for having me here. I
Thank
always
you.
love
Oh my
hanging
God,
out with
thank you for coming. I'm so happy to finally have you, and I'm gonna have you again, I'm sure. I love this conversation.
No, I feel like this is our hack for when, we don't want the
Yeah,
kids to be
next
around.
time
We
we'll
want to
bring
talk.
coffee.
Yeah,
This will be our
exactly.
coffee date from now on.
This is the hack.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of
Thank
course.
you for listening to another episode of Well Rooted. If you enjoyed today's episode and felt it brought you value, please subscribe, leave a comment, give us a like, and a review. This episode of Well Rooted has been brought to you by Girard & Associates CPAs. With locations across all of Los Angeles, Girard & Associates has been helping entrepreneurs and creatives make their dreams come true for over 2 decades. Go to girardcpa.com to learn more. This is Haneen, and we are all well rooted.